What is going on, everybody, and welcome to another video. Today we're checking out Feature History Fall of the Mongols. This is the second part. We saw the rise of the Mongols last episode. This is the fall. So yeah, without further ado, we're going to get into this quite quickly. Be sure to suggest me any videos, leave a like and drop a piece of feedback to help me improve in the comments, and let's get into this.
And then not featuring the Mongol Empire, because in today's video we'll be following up the previous rise of the Mongols with the fall of the Mongols. In the last video we talked all about how Genghis united the Mongols, did a whole lot of warring and then a bit of dying, and how his heir, Ogadai, did exactly that as well. I then left my audience on a cliffhanger for a month with the empire left in the unstable regency of Ogadai's wife, Turajin. So let's finally dive into this now and see how one man's hard work and victories can be so swiftly undone by cruel time. Turajin had, since Ogadai's death in 1241, planted herself in the favour of Karakorum's aristocrats, generally through a lot of favours and heavy corruption. Those in the empire's capital supported the succession of her son, Guyuk. However, for him to become Great Khan, all Khans must attend the Kurultai, and Batu, Khan of the Golden Horde, was still far west and refused to attend, claiming illness. The stalemate stood for 4 years, a pretty long time to be having a sickie, but Batu would eventually send his brothers in his stead, and Guyuk would finally be elected as Great Khan in 1246. After that, Batu and Guyuk would constantly be in a standoff with each other. Batu's control over the western realms was repeatedly preempted by Guyuk, and the Joshide and Ogadide families would be in a fierce competition with one another. In 1248, Guyuk would do 2 things. One is he would call that Batu should really meet him in person, and at the same time, he raised an army. It was to march to the Middle East to destroy the troublesome Islamic Hashashins, but Batu was still warned that Guyuk might be trying to arrest him. So Guyuk began to move west with an army, and Batu began to move east with his own army. But the showdown didn't happen. Guyuk died. Some believe he was poisoned, some believe he was just sick, and it should be noted, he was an alcoholic. No matter what happened, Batu was blameless, and Guyuk was dead. The next Great Khan needed to be elected, and the Ogadide family was left with no suitable successor. Batu would go ahead and host his own Kurultai outside the heartland, and those that attended elected Batu, who actually refused the position and instead endorsed Monga, the son of Tolai, as Great Khan. The Ogadide and Chagatai families refused to accept Monga or simply anyone outside their families. Batu would order a more formal Kurultai to be hosted in the capital, which saw Monga officially elected as Great Khan in 1251. But that was going to happen given it was boycotted by the rival families.
Look like that.
As soon as Monga entered power, he learnt of a conspiracy that the Ogadide were planning to usurp him. He ordered a purge that saw 300 people executed and many others imprisoned or exiled. The estates of the Ogadide and Chagatai were seized, and the Tolide family's position was secured in an alliance with the Joshide. Monga proved to be a great administrator. Under his early reign, he began many construction projects, administered reforms, and fostered the creation of empire-wide postage and trade. The security the empire offered became known as the Pax Mongolica, Mongol peace. The quote has been heard lots. A young woman with a gold plate on her head could travel from one end of the Silk Road to the other with no fear. That's how effective Mongol order was. But while the people felt security, Monga didn't. The Chagatai family still held influence in their own Khanate, and the Joshide controlled the Golden Horde more as Monga's ally, not as his vassal. He sought to further consolidate Tolide power by assigning his brothers Hulaku and Kublai to
Kublai Khan's the other guy I heard of.
Hulaku would expand the empire out into the heart of the Islamic world, establishing the Ilkhanate. The new Khanate would be responsible for the destruction of the Hashashin order in 1256 and the sacking of Baghdad in 1258. Hulaku oversaw the destruction of the old Abbasid Caliphate, centuries of Islamic knowledge, and almost 1 million lives. Kublai on the other side of the empire would play a major role in the continued war against the ever-resistant Song dynasty. The front against the Song was expanded, Kublai forced the submission of the small Dalai kingdom, and attempts by other generals were made to go even further, invading Vietnam. The tropical climate, scorched earth, and guerrilla tactics of the Vietnamese were however just as effective here as they were in the Vietnam War. The Mongols were repelled. By 1259, Hulagu had conquered his way past Syria, and Kublai was making steady gains against the Song with no intention of letting up. But like always, the Great Khan is not immortal, and Monga would get a bad case of the terminal poos. Dysentery.
Yeah.
The emperor died and old nobles were summoned to witness another Kurultai. Hulagu began the long trek home, leaving a sizable part of his army on the campaign without him. At this same time, the Egyptian Mamluks would reach an agreement with the Crusaders to focus on the Mongol threat, and the Mamluks would defeat the invaders in the Battle of Ain Jalut. Kublai didn't wish to see his campaign see the same setback, and decided he wouldn't abandon his post. In the absence of the brothers, the youngest of Talai's sons, Arik Bokeh, would have himself elected as Great Khan. His siblings didn't really agree, and Kublai and Hulagu marched to the capital not to vote, but to fight. Kublai would call a Kurultai on his own territory in northern China, and with the support of the local administrators, was elected Great Khan. So their father Talai had raised 3 Great Khans at this point, and 2 of them were Khan at the same time. Arik Bokeh would ally himself with the late Batu's brother and successor, Berkai Khan. However, Berkai would have little actual involvement in the main conflict between Kublai and Arik Bokeh, as he sought to expand the Golden Horde into the territory of the rival Ilkhanate. He marched his army over, and Hulagu and Berkai were locked in war over on the west side of the empire. Kublai made the reluctant march north as Arik Bokeh sat in his seat of power, which, given his actions, actually had no power. The city of Karakorum meant nothing without the Mongol Empire, and the civil war left the Mongol capital with few supply lines to use. It was just a city in the middle of a harsh wasteland. Kublai, on the other hand, had the full force of northern China to bring with him, and China's cities, power, and wealth were well founded. Hulagu would pass away during the conflict, and so would Berkai. Arik Bokeh would meet Kublai in battle and be sent on the retreat. His allies deserted him, and he surrendered to Kublai in 1264. Kublai Khan was the emperor who brought the war to its end, but the sieges in the empire lasted. Kublai's earliest actions saw immediate focus placed back on the east of the empire. Under Kublai, the Goryeo would finally capitulate, and Korea was incorporated into the Khan's new regime, the Yuan dynasty. Kublai began to style himself as a Chinese emperor, and moved the Mongol capital to Beijing, which, while appeasing his Chinese subjects, distanced himself from the Western Khanates. The Khan's dynasty would force the Song imperial family's surrender in 1276, making it the first ever foreign dynasty to unite all of China. But this victory would be one of Kublai's last. Under him, the Mongols seemed to be reaching a natural limit of conquest. Expansion west into Africa was...
So they literally just conquered too much and they couldn't go anymore. I mean, that's fair enough. I mean, that's what I'm taking from it. Because literally I think they've gone all the way. You can see Finland's in there. Like, they've gone all the way to Central Europe. They're going down towards Africa. You know, they've got the whole of China, the whole of the Middle East. Like, that's a lot of ground. You know what I mean? That's a lot. And I don't know the comparison of which is the biggest empire of all time. Some people say, I think officially it's called the British Empire is the biggest in terms of land mass. The Mongol Empire is second, but I don't know. I mean, someone can confirm that for me. But
blocked by the Egyptian Mamluks. Expansion east into Japan saw the Mongol navy sink in 2 typhoons.
Oof.
Expansion north would be nothing but cold, harsh Siberian waste, and expansion south into Vietnam was repeatedly repelled, not to mention to cross into somewhere like India would require them to march through the Himalayas.
Down.
Conquest was the lifeblood of the empire. It was a war-based society, but war was no longer beneficial. Kublai Khan would be the last Mongol emperor, and it could be argued he wasn't really one at all. The Golden Horde and Chagatai Khanate often ignored, resisted, or even combated the Great Khan, and despite that, much of Kublai's focus was placed on fostering a culture of art and poetry in China. Kublai's court would welcome the famous European explorer Marco Polo, and so much of what we know about the Mongols in the West comes from just one man's insight into just one Khan. Kublai was painted as a grand emperor, and as much as he was, he constantly lived in the shadow of his grandfather, Genghis Khan. His failed invasions and abandonment of traditional Mongol rulership haunted him. He became grossly overweight in his old age and died in 1294. Not quite the heroic death you might have expected. His successor, Temur Khan, established peace with the Western Khanates, who agreed to recognize Yuan dynasty's nominal supremacy, which was in name only. The Mongol Empire didn't exist. Instead, it was now just a loose connection between four Khanates. The Yuan dynasty would pass from emperor to emperor up until in 1368 the Red Turban Rebellion saw the Yuan dynasty overthrown by the Chinese Ming. The remnants of the Yuan retreated to the Mongolian heartland. The Ilkhanate would convert to Islam and embrace Persian and Arabic culture. The Black Death, which ironically the Mongol Empire's trade and Eurasian connections most likely spread, saw the Khanate ravaged and disintegrate into many smaller states, which had very little to do with their Mongol roots. The Golden Horde also saw the influences of Islam and Christianity strip their identity, and they split into smaller Khanates in the 15th century. Their former subjects in the Rus would create the Russian Empire, which across its campaigns would incorporate all these Khanates by 1783. And finally, the Chagatai Khanate would be dominated by the heavily Mongol-inspired Timurid Empire in 1370, and that empire would spin off into the mostly Indian Mughal Empire in the 16th century, and that empire was conquered by the not even remotely Mongolic British Empire in the 19th century. The Mongolia we see today is the result of the Northern Yuan dynasty falling apart into smaller Khanates and being conquered by the Qing in the late 17th century.
Mongolia is a
when the
big
Qing
country,
fell in 1911, the powers that be in Outer Mongolia were heavily influenced by Russian and Chinese communists and became the Mongolian People's Republic across the 20th century. And with the collapse of the Soviet Union, the modern Mongol state was born. It's only been recently that Mongolians could freely look back to their past, their traditions, and celebrate them. And so that's why more and more we hear about the positives of the brutal, conquest-happy Mongol Empire. It's a point of pride for the small landlocked country that once in the past, even if it was very loose and short-lived, they were the biggest empire in the world. So many empires are forgotten. Many of the empires I mentioned in this video were massive in size and yet pretty obscure. So while yes, the Mongols were responsible for cruel tragedies, the spread of the Black Death, and the reduction of human population by 5%, the wounds of the past have healed. No one is personally saddened by the hurt of a distant relative they never knew and still don't. The pride of Mongolia, the culture it has to celebrate, and the fact that everyone around the world even knows the name of this remote Asian country, that's all important today. And I think that's why the Mongol Empire's trade, culture, and social significance is just as important to highlight as its very well-known brutality. However, it is still good fun to highlight the Mongols' wars and battles, and if you're looking for more in-depth on that, you should jump over to Curiosity Stream, where you can...
Okay, so yeah, I was gonna say that Mongolia isn't really a country that's in any sort of power today. You know, Mongolia isn't seen as a superpower in the world. It's not exactly very influential. It's not a popular country. Like, you know, there's not a lot of tourism, stuff like that. You know, it's like in the middle of Russia and China, two of the most powerful countries in the world. Probably takes a lot of influence from them. One day that country was literally the most powerful empire in the world. You know, they built the most powerful empire, and as a result everybody knows who they are, which is crazy. You know, I don't know what the stats are today of how many people could have potentially originated from that empire all across, you know, Europe and well, Eastern Europe and, you know, Turkey and the Middle East and stuff like that. So yeah, that's insane. Obviously they conquered so much, and like he said, it only really fell because a lot of people kept dying, like a lot of leaders. And when Kublai Khan became the when he became in charge, he didn't really want to focus on conquering and stuff anymore, and he wasn't really accepted by everybody, and it just started to break apart because obviously probably lots of little wars, lots of people fighting back, there wasn't enough troops, and it just gradually shrunk. But yeah, thank you all for watching this video. If you made it to the end, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you are new to the channel, and yeah, I'll see you all next time.